Alright, for the ART307s, I'm going to do a really fast recap for the basic interface of Photoshop. I know I had some older videos on this, but I just wanted to make sure it was refreshed with this new version of the Creative Cloud so that it has a little bit more harmony with what you're looking at on your screen versus my older videos. I have just opened a plain photo. I am going to show some of the adjustments to it, but I just want to cover the navigation quickly. Remember, anything with these drop-down double arrows is going to give you different view options. So if you want to expand or collapse, you're going to be able to. And what we discussed in class was to figure out which system of these will work best for your workflow, because one of the goals of this course is to make sure that you have figured out which system works best for you so that you have efficiency for when you're working. So for our toolbars, we can do the doubles, we can do the, I've called it the old school for the palettes, or we can go with the sort of symbols and button style. It's going to depend which one you like best. I do prefer the old school palette style and the newer one column so that I have more use for my screen. Our move key is going to allow us to, in our toolbar, let's start with those. The move tool is going to allow us to rearrange the objects that we have on our screen. Right now I just have one photo, and when I click to try to move it, I can't because it's still locked. But once we start adding things on there, we're going to be able to use this. We have our rectangular marquee. If we click and hold, we have other options under it. We have the elliptical or the circular marquee. It will make an ellipse. Or if you hold down your shift key, it's going to make a circle. The same thing will ring true for the rectangular. We can make a rectangle, or if we hold down our shift key, we can make a square. So it's going to depend what you need. The lasso is another selection tool. I could draw an organic shape. We can see the marching ants. I'll just sort of make a weird shape, but whatever we're trying to get, like if we're just trying to take the trees quickly, this is not, by the way, what you would be doing. You'd be able to make a sort of quick selection on that using your lasso. There is underneath the polygon. I'll just make a lightning bolt. So if you needed to make a polygon shape, you're going to start and stop at the same point, just a heads up. Then you're able to get that. Just to demo this, since it's selected, then I'll do an undo. If we switch back to our move tool, whatever is selected is going to now move with that. I'm going to undo, and then Command D to deselect that. And then we have the magnetic lasso, which if we roughly / quickly draw along that edge, it kind of finds the smart line to this. This is a nice way to do a quick grab. If you're not looking for something with precision, obviously you can see it's sort of clumping it around, but it is a good way to get, you know, a rough estimate of what you're shooting for. Like I said, we're going to, and that looks awful, I'm aware, we're going to have an entire section just on selection, so I'm not going to over fixate on that right now. They're going to have their own videos coming up. But the magnetic's kind of nice if you just want to grab something on the fly with a little bit more precision than hand drawing. We have the quick selection and magic wand. Quick selection, we'll just quickly grab whatever is in that sort of field. You can see when I deselect, it does grab pretty quickly, so there's sometimes not a lot of control with it, but it does roughly do the job. The magic wand will grab according to samples. So right here you're seeing it's a sample of 80 according to whatever color this is. If you bump that tolerance up, let's say 150, it's going to grab a little bit more, so on and so forth. Maybe in this case, let's take it down to, I don't know, 120. Not quite so much because I wanted to keep some of these trees. But if you wanted to grab the sky, if you hold down your shift key, and also this goes for all of the selection tools, this turns into a plus, and then you can start grabbing more of the area, so it'll be a little bit more accurate. And you can see I thought I grabbed the blue, but I had grabbed the green. You might want to zoom in for this part. But what's nice with this is if you just wanted, say, the sky, and I'll hit delete just so you can see. I'm going to fill it with white, and then you can see what happens. All that will disappear. Command Z to undo that. Remember, it's going to be one of your best friends with all of these programs. The crop tool, it now has handles in each corner. If I didn't want the lake part for whatever reason, I can slide it up, double click, and then that part is done. I'm going to undo. And then remember what I said about the slice tools. We're not going to worry about this until we go into the web more, so just ignore the rest of these for now. The eyedropper is going to take samples, so if you watch the foreground color swatch, if I click on the blue, it's going to grab that color blue. If we get this sort of murky green, I'm going to click, it's going to take that sort of murky green, and you can choose whatever color you're looking for to set your type or what have you, or if you're going to sample this and then paint over it, that works also. The healing brush we're going to come back to when we're dealing more with portraitures and or photo restoration, so don't worry about that quite yet. The brush tool, well, we just chose a color, there we go. It's going to take whatever your foreground color is. Remember, this is foreground and the background, and undoing it because it will only undo one. And since I'm painting right on top of that, you know, it will replace that. But the brush will paint for you. Up here under our menu, you can change the size. You can make it soft. You can make it hard according. I have a lot more brushes on mine. I'm going to show you in a later session how to make your own brushes and then how to upload ones that others have created. But for now, let's just focus on what is default within our program, and then we'll work our way into this. Clone stamp we're going to come back to. The erase tool, pretty self-explanatory. It will erase to whatever color is in your background. So let's just say these reversed. The arrows above our foreground and background will reverse. So if now I'm deleting, it's going to be that green color, just as a heads up. So if you start to erase and it's a weird color, just remember that. Switch those back. Paint bucket is going to drop the color of paint accordingly. So if you have a photo, it's going to sort of act as a sample and paint on top of whatever color that you're going to be clicking on. Gradient is hiding underneath this. Right now, you can see our gradient is green to white. It's going foreground to background. I'm going to just click, and that's obviously going to cover what we were working on. Underneath that is more options also, so we would have had the foreground to transparent. So this is kind of nice if you're doing an effect. Let's say we wanted a footer on the bottom where this is sort of bleeding into. Not ideal, but maybe we could put some of our info in there and it'll make the ad sort of blend into whatever is underneath from there. And when we get the photos, we're going to deal with the rest of these. For our beginning projects, those will be what I'm going to refer to as our basics. We're going to have a selection, entire section on that, so don't worry about that. The type tool we covered also, since I was allowing type to be used in this project. You can just click. What ends up happening over in your layers, it's going to put your type in a layer. I'm going to write summer fun with an exclamation. Double click so that you can select your type. You can change your type size up here. I also have my type out here on my side, so you can change it here as well. It's whatever area is going to be easier for you to work with. You can change your typeface. I will grab whatever is first. If it's going off the page like this, grab your move tool, slide it wherever. You can, I'm going back into my type tool, I'm hitting the T because T is the shortcut for the type tool. I can put my cursor in the size box and then use my up arrow and it's going to make it larger or smaller accordingly. I'm going to do it from the top. It's not changing it from there. There we go. Oh, because I was in leading. My bad. So you can change the size that way, and that would be over here also. I was just in the wrong spot. You can use your free transform, which is Command T. There we go. Just make sure you're holding your Shift key down when you're doing that, and I'll redo that. Grab from a corner. I do see this a lot in class. People grab from this middle and the bottom. Sometimes the middles and the bottom does not maintain the proportion, and we do want the proportion, so make sure you're grabbing from the corner. So this corner, that corner, any of the diagonals, just not on the main points. If you're in the free transform, you can tilt also, flip it around, do whatever you want with it. The free transform's nice because you can resize and reposition, move it around, etc. You're going to have a lot more flexibility with that. I'm going to put that back in its place. Hitting enter will keep however you've just edited. To change your colors, I'm just going to go back into type. For type, it wants to be selected when you're doing it. If you click at the top here where the mouse is pointing, you can change your color there. And I'll just deselect so you can see it. Double click to select it, or sorry, triple click. I'm going to change it from here. Let's make it a weird minty green. Select it. You can drag it over on your colors, any color that you want. And you can click on your swatches and change your color there. So it's going to, again, swatches, color at top or on the side. Any of these work. And again, if you're on the side, just make sure you're double clicking to get the foreground color, if that's what you're changing the picker up. For this, you can see it has the hue saturations, the RGBs, labs, CMYK, and here is our hex numbers. If you get into the web design side more, this is more what you're going to be paying attention to. And if you're in web design, click that box because these are the web safe colors. So print, web. So if you're having issues with your colors, not getting a good report whenever you run them with web design, just make sure this one's selected, and then you would sample accordingly. So those are web safe. These are for print. Print, obviously, you're going to have a lot more control over whenever you're doing your mixing. But if you're switching to web, make sure you're using web. If you need to change your mode, and I'm still in my type, if something's grayed out, just know that you need to either activate the change or switch to your tool. Type tool is going to block a lot of these options out. Right now we're in RGB. If you need a grayscale, you're going to change there. CMYK if you're print, and the others your press people will, or your boss will let you know. For ours, since we're mostly print, stick with the CMYK. Don't flatten. I do have layers on this. If I flatten my image, this layer is going to disappear and it's not going to be editable anymore, and we do not want that to happen. So just make sure you do not flatten or you do not merge. Just you want your layers. I'm going to go ahead. If I no longer want this, I have two options. I can just hide it and the summer fun will disappear, or I can click on this little trash can icon in your layers palette and it'll just be deleted. For adjusting photos, this is sort of part 2 of our first lecture. Before I set you guys loose, we went briefly through some of these adjustments, and I didn't do all of them, so we'll just pop through a couple of them. It looks like some of them are toned out, so I'm going to take it back to RGB just to see if that was the problem. So now they all are working. If this happens, just switch back to RGB, do what you need to do, and then toss it back into CMYK. The first one that I usually deal with, now also, I should add this preface to it. I mean, it's non-ideal, but if you're still not sure what looks good, these 3 here, the auto tone, auto contrast, auto color, just try these 3 to get comfortable with it. They're not great, but at least it gets it a little bit closer to what I'm going to call a standard photo for print. until you get more comfortable with it. But I would say, you know, you're in the 307, let's make the jump and start doing our own adjustments when it comes to photos. So let's start with the brightness contrast. Always make sure preview box is checked. Oops, so that you can see what's going on. I'm just going to slide this off to the side so we can see the photo. Go with the extremes so we can see what's happening. Obviously, brightness at the highest is going to be really bright, really, really dark. And we can see in the middle here we get a sort of burnout, so that would be bad, and obviously the same thing's happening at the other end. So we're losing a lot of info. So sometimes just kick it up a little bit if you want, because it was a sort of murkier photo. That way you get a little bit more detail here in the water. And the same thing with the contrast. I'm going to take it all the way up. You can see what happens, really, really darks, really, really lights. And adversely, then it just sort of becomes washed out. So high contrast, not much contrast. Where I work, the one place, the rule is usually they kept it at around the same. Sometimes you might need to bump it up a little bit more, but when in doubt, I would say start with around the same, and if it looks like it needs a little bit kick more or less, then you can go from there. But I usually started around the like 30-25 marker just to see how that looked, and then go from there. Like what we were talking about in class, this is part of that sort of training your aesthetic, what looks good, what doesn't look good, what's going to reinforce your image. You need to spend a little bit of time just figuring out what looks good. So research it on the web, and then just grab some of your photos and do some edits. I'm going to hit OK. Let's pop down to that next one. We're coming back to levels in another session, so we'll worry about that later. Curves, we did cover. Remember, this is the one that can make what I jokingly call the psychedelic look. If you click on the line and then start morphing them, this is just a fun, crazy effect. Certainly not what they had in mind for curves when getting made. So I'm just going to cancel that. Apple M brings it back. What we're going to do with instead is with the finding your white point and then finding your black point. So this is setting the extremes for your photo, and the midpoint is going to sort of figure itself out once we have those two set. I am going to say off the bat the white point's pretty much set because we have our clouds. So we click on that, click on the cloud, not a whole lot has happened. So I'm going to click on the blue, which is more of a mid-tone, so you can see what happens. What it says is basically from this percent up to the white is going to turn white. Let me make sure that's clicked, sorry. There we go. So it takes the whole sky that was that blue and it turns it into that highest point. We don't want that. So I'm happy with where it was set. Let's do the black point. I'll probably go into the nice shadowed area. That was probably too much. Remember, you can do one undo with this. That looks a lot better. That way you have the full range. And you can see it sort of adjusted itself out. We'll get into histograms, which is what's happening in the background later. For now, I'm okay with this part. But you can get a nice value range from this so that you know you're going to have the dark darks in your piece and the light lights of your piece. And I'll hit OK. Next one, exposure, if it's overexposed, underexposed, etc. There are some defaults if you want to go into those. So maybe you want to make it more, less, etc. I don't know, maybe just tone it down a little bit. You can do offsets. Woo! Look at that. To either extreme. Pick accordingly. You can have some corrections. Again, practice is going to make perfect. I'm not liking what happened there, so I'm probably not even going to keep this because I was actually relatively happy with this photo. You can do highlights, you can do the mids. Let's just go crazy with it, etc. And then it will do the shadows. So you have 3 options with that. Vibrance. Let's do the extremes all the way. It's going to make the greens really green, the blues really blue, and then that's just going to fade it a little bit. Saturation is going to really dump the color in, and that one's going to make it black and white. So we have the two extremes. I jokingly call these the Instagram ones, you know, the ones they're like really green and the really blue. Wow, there we go, Instagram ready. But the vibrance, you can go too far with those, so just use them accordingly and sparingly, but you can have a lot of fun with that. Hue saturation, I'm just going to leave it to the default. You know, if you had too much blue, etc., you can change the hue. So let's just take it to the extreme, oversaturate, undersaturate, make it lighter, make it darker, etc. I do find that people find the tools that they like the most, so maybe you're going to be more into the lightness, the saturation, and then tweaking hue a little bit. You can do all of that from here. I'll just hit OK. Actually, I don't want to keep that, so I'm going to do an undo. Hue saturation, vibrance. Let's go to color balance. There is a lot of green in this. It was a weird sort of murky green algae lake, but maybe if we don't want that, so I'm just going to, you know, put a little bit less of the yellows and greens and add a little bit more of the blues just to offset that a little bit, to make it a little bit more attractive for water rather than the green that it actually was. Actually, let me go back into that one. But the same dealio. You can take these to the extremes to sort of see what they do. More green, more magenta, which these sort of look like the weird Holga presets. So if you're into the Holga style, you might want to explore color balance. And then the yellows, or if you like that 70s look with your photos, you can achieve that through here also. And then just like before, the shadows, the midtones, and highlights are there. So that way you can explore those. The other ones I covered real quick was the invert. That is our reverse. Basically, it's the negative of it, which with color can look interesting. With black and white, you could actually turn it into a contact print if you want it, if you're photography design split. And the rest of it, let's deal with those later. I did mention briefly in the one class, I'm not sure if I mentioned it in all, but since this is at my home computer, I have access to my libraries, which is connected to my phone, and I use that Adobe Kuler, that's Kuler, which you can get that app in the App Store. And it's a photo-based app for creating color schemes. So if you go and you take a photo of this, you could take a photo of this and then pop into Kuler and take a photo of it. It's going to sample some of the colors. And you can see, I don't have a ton of them on here, but we have the themes that I've taken through there and different swatches that I've saved that I end up, it sort of finds that you use them through different projects and it will actually save them. You can create new ones, etc. And they're going to be read throughout all of your devices that are activated through your Creative Cloud login. So that actually is kind of useful. And that is one thing when I was doing this I remembered I forgot to cover. You can peel out the palettes, you can push them back in, you can peel them out and close them if you don't want the libraries, and everything's found under your window, so you can just pull it back out if you so desire. And that does add to that flexibility of your workspace. You can save your workspace, which I'm not because I have it set up how it is. But if I wanted to, I would click on Workspace under Window, New Workspace, and name it something. I recommend it in class that you make a couple of these so that you can explore and see which ones you like, which systems are working best, etc. And then you can sort of pop through them, see what was working and what wasn't working. And never ever worry about getting something messed up, because you can see there's all the defaults, so you can always just pop back to whatever the default is and it will remember it. But since I'm the only person on my computer at home, it's already set up to how I like it, so I don't have to worry about that. But do take some time to do the editing and figuring out which works best for you. Rearrange them. I actually usually like the swatches out and the colors. I try to keep the colors and styles together, and I like my layers, channels, and paths together. And then when I'm working more typographic based, I like my type ones out. But again, you won't know what you like until you explore, and I think that's a big chunk of this class, is just figuring out which system works best for you. So for the first in-class and for the first project, we're focusing on the basics, basic adjustments, the basic tools, and then going from there. I'll have the next unit that I will put up probably this weekend on selections, so it gets you used to merging pieces together. And then we'll also have a section just on layers and layer management, because that stuff can get out of control quickly if you aren't paying attention to it. But like right now, we just had the background, and when we had the type, it enabled itself, so we didn't have to worry about that. So we'll get into the further nitty-gritties in the next one, but for our first project and for our first in-class, this is going to cover everything that you're going to need on the basics, and then we will go from there. All right, have a good day. See you later.